Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so excited for you to get to hear today from Shelby Forsythia. And just in our short little introduction to each other here already before we started recording, you're in for a treat. And Shelby, glad you're with us. And we're going to be talking about grief, which is one of my favorite topics. Um, I think people that know have been listening to the podcast for a while know kind of a little bit of my story and just how that grief folds its way into all of that. But Shelby, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yes, absolutely. I am right now a grief coach, a podcaster, and an author of now three books. But I think a lot of people joke, and I don't know if this is true for you too, that like I didn't set out to do grief work as a kid. Like if you had asked me what I wanted my life to be or look like as a child, I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to be a singer, I wanted to be a painter, I wanted to be a lot of different things. And then I'll condense this here because I've done this on a lot of other different podcasts and you can go find them and listen to them. But I experienced when I was 17 what I lovingly refer to as the 4 years of hell. And it happened to
Mm,
be the time when I was in college, but being in college had nothing to do with it. Within the span of 4 years when I was growing up, after a pretty idyllic and like heavy air quotes, but like normal suburban childhood, my father lost his job of more than 19 years, which is a sort of grief event. Like the financial stability of
mhm,
our family was changed. And then I came out of the closet as a queer person in the South, which was kind of
mhm,
accepted, but also kind of really not. And God was used as a weapon against me in our
mhm,
home.
mhm,
My father was diagnosed with two of some of the largest brain aneurysms that have ever been recorded in the state of North Carolina, one on either side of his head. And there was a
wow.
point where he was on a wait list for brain surgery and was contemplating his own mortality of, am I actually going to go through with this? And watching him as an 18, 19-year-old reckon with the fact that he may very well die or one of these aneurysms might rupture and he may die before even
Mhm,
getting to surgery, watching him go into surgery, recover from that, become a different person as a result of that. And then, as soon as the meal trains and the casseroles and the carpools to Duke Hospital ended after his surgeries, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer.
mm,
And so our family was once again plunged into orbiting around her diagnosis as a reality of as a grief event of our lives. And so we started doing carpools to Duke Hospital. We started having meal trains again. And I'm not ungrateful for the support, but I say all of this to say it was 4 back-to-back years of unrelenting grief and change. And that
mhm,
culminated in December of 2013, where my mom's cancer that had gone into remission suddenly came back. And there was nothing more that the medical system could do for her. They called our
mhm,
family on December 19th and said, we can no longer cure you. We can only buy you time. And you should
mhm,
probably call in hospice. And that's exactly what my family did. And they said, you probably have 6 weeks to 6 months to kind of put your affairs in order, say goodbye, based on what we've seen before. And she died in 7 days on the day after
mhm,
Christmas, which was her favorite holiday. And I tell this
mhm,
story so differently and so succinctly now. But at the time, 13 years ago, when I was 21 years old, it was like the entire world fell out from underneath my feet. It wasn't just the
sure.
foundation of my life, it was the flooring and the house and the dirt and the center of the earth. Like everything fell out from under me. And in losing my mom, I didn't just lose her, although I did, I lost hope for reconciliation or repair over me being a queer person. I lost
Mhm,
her presence and existence at all of my future life milestones. I lost her glue ness of holding the family together. I lost
mhm,
the relationship as I knew it with my immediate family members. I lost my faith in a God that if you're good enough, good
mhm,
things will happen. And if you're bad enough, bad things will happen. Kind of the
right.
duality, good God, bad God,
Mhm,
that I had been raised in. And I also lost things that I thought would always be true about myself, like my energy, like my creativity, like my desire to be alive.
mhm,
And her death, I often, I've experienced many more losses since, but I refer to hers as the first and the worst because it was the one that really opened my eyes to it is possible to lose anything, anyone, at any time for any reason and no reason at all. And to have that as a worldview is
mhm,
absolutely life changing. And I didn't really pursue grief work or even acknowledging my own grief until 3 years later when I was in downtown Chicago and someone stole my wallet out of my bag. It was not a violent altercation or process, but I had had my bag on the
Mm-hmm.
back of a chair, which I now know not to do. But someone just
Mm-hmm.
slid their hand in and walked out with my wallet. And that was, after 3 years of suppressing my grief, the straw that broke the camel's back for whatever reason. Having this thing that was
Right.
so vital and precious to my life, my wallet that my identity was literally in, taken, broke me open to finally grieving for my mother. And I write about this in
Yeah.
my first book, Permission to Grieve. But when I was done wailing and weeping over the lost wallet slash trap door into my mother's death, I heard this voice in my head and it was like, you just gave yourself permission to grieve. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean? And that was one of my favorite authors, Gretchen Rubin, would call it the lightning bolt moment that sparked this constant lifelong investigation of what does it mean to give yourself permission to grieve? Because
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that in that moment before I had never felt worse, as soon as the grief moved through me and I let all those emotions come through, I had never felt better. And that was really counterintuitive to me. That was not what I expected. I
Right.
lived in this world where you push down your grief and you carry on like normal. And if you keep busy, it all fixes
Mm-hmm.
itself eventually. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have been on a lifelong journey ever since to continue to be what I call a student of grief. So I study grief, I write about grief, I talk about grief, I work with grief with others. And
Mm-hmm.
it is now the work of my life, I believe, to talk about grief even more in a world that continues somehow to still
Mm-hmm.
be illiterate when it comes to talking about loss.
Yeah.
That's how I got here.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, you're so right. I think we've, throughout time, I'm sure we could go back in history and look at the history of, grief, which I know I did a lot of study around that myself, and just, everybody is taught to keep a stiff upper lip and to
Hmm.
put on the happy face and to pretend like you're not hurting inside or pretend like you've got to go on or the one I hate the most is you will get over it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, okay,
and
great.
no,
When? How?
yeah,
With
yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
have many
yeah.
questions.
Right, right. And it's yeah, and as I've always said, you don't get over grief, you move through it. And so
Mhm.
it's just yeah, and so yeah. And so yeah, so that's fascinating to me just thinking about your experience of allowing yourself to grieve and what it means to grieve. And so I'm curious about if you have been able to put words to what it means to grieve and
Yeah.
what that is.
Yeah, I actually I didn't have them at the time, and this is kind of one of those things where I'm looking back later and I was able to put words to it. But this is a great deal of what I talk about in my first book, which is called Permission to Grieve, based on that
Hmm.
bedroom floor finally grieving moment. And in studying grief and reading about grief and writing about grief and talking about grief for quite a few years, about 3 or 4 years after the wallet incident, I've lumped permission to grieve into three categories. And so there's permission to feel, which I think is what most people think of. There's permission to
Hmm.
have your emotions, to express your emotions, to let your feelings move through you. There's permission to do, which is permission to take your grief out into the world and to physically do something with it. So it's like have a ritual, construct a memorial, run a 5K in honor of somebody, carry a coin in your pocket, or wear a piece of their
Hmm.
jewelry, or something like
Right.
that. And then the last one is more subtle. It's permission to be. And this is permission for grief to change your identity. This is permission to
Hmm.
become different as a result of grief because whether you like it or not, whether you consent to it or not, grief inevitably changes you. And so permission to be looks a lot like allowing identity to either
Hmm.
change or to not be certain. And
Hmm.
that's a really sticky, tricky one for some people. But if you are struggling with how to grieve or where do I begin grieving, a question worth asking yourself is do I need to give myself permission to feel, permission to be, or permission to do? And often
Hmm.
starting there can give you a good roadmap of like, do I feel like I'm struggling to take action as a result to my grief or to honor someone through physical actions? Am I struggling to feel my feelings or am I struggling to let grief change me or admit how
Hmm.
much grief has changed me?
Yeah, and I think about it, in terms of, kind of the therapeutic world, it's a process of detaching from someone. We know about attachment theory and all of that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
um, when someone dies and we're no longer without them, as you said, we have to totally redefine ourselves because that object of our attachment is no longer there. And so trying to figure out what to do with that and filling that empty space that is left,
Hmm.
and really just trying to, okay, who am I now? That's a total, yeah, you're right on the mark. And, as I like to say, it's a process of finding a new normal, and
Yes.
being able to accept the fact that the old normal is never going to be. And then how do you move forward with that?
Yes, absolutely. And something that so many clients initially come to me with is not just how do I grieve the person I lost or the thing that I lost or the relationship I lost, the life that I used to live. It's like, how do I grieve myself? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's not a societal structure or a ritual for
Mm-hmm.
essentially having a memorial to the old you, to the person
Mm-hmm.
that lost, forced you to leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a very big thing that I do in working with grieving people in group settings and one-on-one is how do you grieve the person that you used to be? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So tell us about your books and kind of that process for you, and what they're about and that kind of thing.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So the first one I've already mentioned a bit, Permission to Grieve, and that's just I say just, that's the three-part structure of the three permissions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Asking, do I need to give myself permission to feel, permission to be, or permission to do? And it's kind of a self-helpy memoir how-to book, but it's more of a workbook. It's full of exercises of if you know or can determine which one you're struggling with, you can flip to that section and figure out how to give yourself the three permissions as you continue to
Mm-hmm.
move through grief. I will always give an asterisk for this one that there's swear words in that book. It's
Mm-hmm.
my first
Yeah.
book. It was
Uh-huh.
self-published. I retell in detail the moment I found out that my mother had died. So there's a lot of swear words involved. I believe grief is a
Mm-hmm.
swear-worthy event.
Yeah,
If you
it
don't, it
is.
might not be the best book to start with.
No, right. Yeah. And there's a lot of colorful language that is appropriate for grief. Yes.
Yes. And that's what I say. It's only in the first two chapters, so skip those if you just want to get to the
Mm-hmm.
to the exercises. My second book is called Your Grief Your Way, and this is a daily non-religious devotional for a year after someone
Mm-hmm.
you love dies. So this is very specific to loss due to death. And it's also, I was approached by Penguin Random House to write this book because they were like, there's a lot of religious devotionals for grief, but sort of like me, people's relationship to God is tested or broken as a
Mm-hmm.
result of grief. And so they're like, we need
Absolutely.
something that has quotes, that has exercises, that has journaling prompts that are not tied to someone's relationship with God. God can be helpful with grief, but not always,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the beginning. And so it's very much a guidebook for 366 days of the year. There's an entry and there's an exercise, and an entry and an exercise, and you don't have to go in order. I say you can play book roulette. You can flip open to any page, like the day your loved one died, or their birthday, or your birthday, and come away with something to think about or something to do as it pertains to
Mm-hmm.
your grief. And it has
Mm-hmm.
some are very like mindfulness exercises, like picturing your loved one in the same room as you and what are they wearing and what are they saying, what advice they would have for your life. Some of them are very practical, of like,
Mm-hmm.
one of the hardest things I had to do after my mother's death was call all the magazines that she was subscribed to and unsubscribe her because we kept getting mail to our house with her name on it. And that was
Right.
like activating for me and my dad, my whole family, cost money. And so one of the tasks I did of grieving was to call subscription companies and unsubscribe my mom. And a lot of people don't think of that or don't know how to move through that. And so that's one of the tips in the book
Right.
too. So it's kind of like the practical and the more
Mm-hmm.
woo-woo, the meditative or the existential. The
Right.
third book, the
Yeah.
new one that's come out now in 2026, is not for grievers necessarily. Grievers can read it. It's more for supporters of grievers who say, I want to be there for someone who's grieving, but I don't know what to say. I don't know the words.
Mm-hmm.
And it is rooted in my 10 years now of working with grieving people as a coach and as a guide. And it contains three unique phrases that when you use them appropriately, they are consistently helpful for all forms of loss, not just death. I
Mm-hmm.
say I work with the three Ds, death, divorce, and diagnosis, but
Mm-hmm.
any other loss that radically changes your life. And it is all about the power of words by themselves as a support tool to help people through
Mm-hmm.
grief. Because I think every grieving person can tell a horror story about somebody
Mm-hmm.
who said to them, their child dies, and they said, God just needed another angel. Or my
Mm-hmm.
story that I tell is 2 months after my mom's death. I walked into a college course because I was still in college when she died. 2 months to the day, I walked into a college course about politics, and unbeknownst to me, we were covering political funerals. And so what we were watching was JFK's assassination and the funeral that followed. Same thing with MLK.
Mm-hmm.
There's people in black, there's hearses, there's crying, there's all
Mm-hmm.
of this stuff happening. And 2 months to the day after my mom's death, I couldn't handle it. So I quietly picked up my bags and walked out, and came back at the end of class to get my coat. And my professor looks me in the eyes and said, "You can't be sad forever." And I
Oh,
absolutely was devastated, just leveled by that
sure.
statement. And so many grievers have stories like this,
Mm-hmm.
but so few have stories about words that
Mm-hmm.
actually help. And in working with grievers for more than 10 years, I'm like, oh, these three phrases, the book's titles,
Mm-hmm.
"Of course I'm here right now." Those are the three phrases. Of course I'm here and
Mm-hmm.
right now. These always help, no matter the loss. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm already getting reviews from people who are saying, "I'm grieving and this is helping me understand how to tell people about my grief." I'm getting reviews from
Mm-hmm.
grief professionals who are like, "I've started using this daily with friends and family members for all kinds of stuff." Somebody didn't get a
Sure.
part in a play, or they lost their wallet, or
Mm-hmm.
they got the news their sister has cancer, or something like that. And it is just absolutely changing how people support each other through grief, whether it's the loss happened yesterday or the
Mm-hmm.
loss is 10, 15, 30 years old. Yeah, so that's my
Right,
newest
right.
one.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so now I'm curious. This makes sense to me, but you might want, would you say more about why these phrases are so helpful for people?
Yeah, absolutely. The book opens with a theory that I have that all grieving people are telling themselves one or more of three painful stories. I'm crazy, I'm alone, and my life is going to be like this forever. And so in
Mm-hmm.
grievers' heads, whether or not they ever say it out loud, there's kind of these records that keep playing of, "I'm crazy, I'm alone, it will be like this forever. I'm crazy, I'm alone, it will be like this forever. Crazy, alone, forever, crazy, alone, forever," just on repeat. And
Mm-hmm.
so many grievers right away, when I say this out loud, they can point to, "Oh, I feel like I'm crazy. No one gets how I feel." Or, "I'm alone. No one understands me. Everyone has moved on. The world's gone back to normal." Or, "It's going to be like this forever. I can't see a way out. I'm stuck in my grief. This pain will never end. I will feel
Mm-hmm.
this bad for the rest of my life." Like some iteration of those three stories is something
Right.
that grieving people are telling themselves at any given moment in time. Again, the loss happened yesterday, all the way to decades and decades later. If you can determine as a supporter which story your grieving person is telling, and even if you can't, the three phrases are direct, like counterweights to those
Mm-hmm.
stories. So for someone who says, "I'm
Mm-hmm.
crazy, my dad died 7 years ago, I shouldn't still be so sad." That's another way of saying, I feel crazy for still being sad. You
Mm-hmm.
could say as a supporter, "Of course you're still sad. Your dad is still dead." And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they're not crazy anymore. You've like broken a spell that this
Mm-hmm.
painful story has over them. For a grieving person who says, "I'm alone, no one understands me, even in a crowded room, I'm all alone," you could say as a supporter, "I may not understand entirely, but I'm here, and I will not forget the fact that you are grieving. I'll keep checking in on you." And
Mm-hmm.
again, that kind of breaks the spell of, "I'm alone. Someone cares about me. Someone understands and knows that I'm grieving and is going to keep remembering that I am a person who has lost. And that is a core part of my identity." Going back to talking about identity. The last
Mm-hmm.
one's the sneaky one, but it's my favorite. For someone who says, "I feel like I'm going to be stuck in this grief forever. This pain will
Mm-hmm.
never end." Instead of saying, "This is just a chapter of your life, just stay busy, time heals all," you could say, "Yeah, right now, I can see how hope would be really hard to find."
Mm-hmm.
You can say, "Right now, I can see how you would never want to date again. Right now, I can understand how you would never want to try for more kids."
Mm-hmm.
And what that phrase does is takes what was a period on the end of a sentence, "I'll never have children again," is, "Right now, I can see how you would never want to have children." And it takes the period and turns it into, "Maybe not. Future could be
Mm-hmm.
different." Without saying, "That's, you know, everything could change tomorrow, or it won't always be
Mm-hmm.
like this." They're there, which is so
Mm-hmm.
patronizing to grieving people. And so to say, in this season, I can totally see how you can't see a way out, or how all
Mm-hmm.
you see is grief, or how in the month of October for me, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, how you are so sick and tired of breast cancer ads. Right
Right.
now, I can see how it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And that phrase, it just anchors them in this moment and this time, as opposed to telling the story, "My life will be suffering forever and ever.
Right.
Amen."
Right.
And so these three phrases, there's a bunch of different ways you can say them,
Mm-hmm.
but by using them consistently with people in your life, with your coworkers, with your clients, with your friends, with your family, you become, through your words, a recognizable safe place that they can bring their pain to, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not trying to positive it up or explain it away or judge them for it, like, "Why haven't you moved on?" or apply
Mm-hmm.
some sort of weird religious stuff. to it. Suddenly you become the person through, of course, who validates their feelings, through I'm here, accompanies and remembers them, and right now anchors their pain in this moment in time.
Right.
And it really is, I hesitate to use like magical language, but it is kind of casting a spell. You're
Yeah.
rewriting a different story that changes how they see
Mm-hmm.
themselves as grieving people. They're not crazy. They're not alone. It won't be like this forever. But you don't contradict their reality. You don't say that. You're
Mm-hmm.
not crazy. You're not alone. It won't be like this forever. You
Yeah.
use different words that change what they tell themselves. And so your relationship, instead of falling away after a loss, which so many grievers grieve their friends and family who don't understand or can't show up for them, your relationship gets stronger. And then they
Mm-hmm.
trust you to be a companion in their grief. And then we all get to live in a world where we know what
Right.
to say when someone is grieving.
Right. Yeah, and I think yeah, I love that. I love the way that you've put all that together, and I love the fact that you've taken what we all experience around grief and reframed it in a way that makes it easier, not necessarily easier, but a better way to talk about grief. And I think the difficulty that most people that are on the kind of the helping side or the supporting side have is that they just are so uncomfortable with it. It's like
Hmm.
they're afraid they're going to do more harm, maybe, or they're going to they're going to bring up something that's going to upset the other person, or they don't know how to just sit with the tears and the grief and the agony of it all.
Yes,
You know.
absolutely. Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the book that I point to when people mention things like that is in the first couple of sections, there's a guide for how do I know that what I'm saying is actually helping?
Mhm.
And one of them is that your grieving person keeps talking, or that they feel safe crying in front of you, or
Mhm.
that they keep sharing more about their loved one or about their divorce or about the diagnosis that they just received. Like the fact that your griever keeps going into their emotions,
Mhm.
it's not something to fear. You can be afraid of it and you can use them on yourself. Of course, you would be afraid of sitting with
Mhm.
someone in their grief. Right now, your job is to witness them in that grief. Like you can use the phrases on yourself if you want. I've had a few
Mhm.
friends
Sure.
start to do that.
Yeah.
But to turn it on its head and be like, this is not an upset, it's a blessing.
Right.
It is a kind of beautiful reward of your words to have that kind of an impact on a person that they continue to open up with you, that the depth goes deeper, as opposed
Mhm.
to feeling like the conversation gets shut down and you just both go back to your day, whatever you're doing. One of my biggest goals is to help supporters reframe if they feel emotionally safe sharing with you, that is not something to be afraid of. That is something that is a blessing to hold and to witness. And obviously, I think
Mhm.
there are moments when, and I write about this in the book too, there are moments when we do feel we need more help than we have to give. We're out of our depth.
Mhm.
Another big fear that supporters have is I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified to talk about this.
Yeah.
But I think we are qualified as humans to talk about feelings and memories and
Mhm.
relationships. We may not be qualified to talk about, I have feelings or thoughts of taking my life. That's when, yes,
Mhm.
absolutely call on the help of a professional. But for
Right.
99.9% of grieving people, what they want to talk about is how hard this is right now, or
Mhm.
what they're going through that it seems like nobody understands, or a person or a memory or a relationship that it seems like the rest of the world has forgotten. All of us have the
Mhm.
capacity to bear witness to that. And it's not a problem. It's not a crisis.
Mhm.
It is simply grief. And I think we live in a world still that treats grief like a crisis. It conflates those two things.
Mhm.
And I'm like, we could all do well and be better at simply acknowledging that grief is not a crisis or a problem to be solved,
Mhm.
unless it's like the point one instance where it is. For the most part, it's just people wanting to share their pain and to know
Mhm.
that they're not alone inside of it.
Right.
And that is something we can all give to each other. There's very
Right.
much a tenor or a tone of the book that's like, we all deserve this kind of support from our friends and family when we are grieving. And so here's how we can become these supporters to other people. And it becomes a
Right.
very cyclical. Sometimes you're the griever, sometimes you're the supporter, sometimes you're both. Sometimes, especially I'm
Mhm.
thinking like grieving spouses who are also supporting children who are grieving, you are grieving yourself, but you are also supporting people. And so you can
Mhm.
totally be, of course, I'm here right nowing your kids while you are
Mhm.
supporting yourself as a griever in grief. We are often grievers and supporters at the same
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
And you don't
Absolutely.
necessarily, and I don't want to dampen on counseling or psychiatry or psychology at all as a
Mm-hmm.
profession, but like you don't always need professional help for grief. We
Mm-hmm.
can all simply witness each other in pain and be like, yeah, that is hard. It is the seventh anniversary of your dad's death. Of course, you would
Mm-hmm.
be dysregulated at work. I had a coworker
Right.
recently whose dad died, and I said, oh, of course you'd be a little off kilter on your dad's death
Mm-hmm.
anniversary. And then I asked, what, if anything, do you do to honor him? And she's like, I'm going to get barbecue because that was his favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, tell me
Right.
more about that. That's not a thing that requires professional support.
Right.
That's a thing we can all
Right.
be and all do and all have
Yeah.
for each other. And it can also take place in professional
Uh-huh.
settings. These are phrases
Right.
that therapists and practitioners can use as well.
Sure. Yeah. The thing about it is, and I remind myself about this when I'm working with people that are grieving, is that the bottom line is I can't fix this for them. I can't
Right.
make the grief go away. And I think just being able to accept that, but also recognize, as you're saying so well, Shelby, is my job as a therapist is just to be with them, is
Hmm.
just to be present with them and hear what they're saying, and then just acknowledging and validating what they're feeling. And there's nothing, in many ways, it's kind of magical when you do that, but in other ways, it's just that simple.
Yes.
And it's just, yeah. And so it's just, like you've said, helping them understand, of course you feel this way. This is quote unquote normal grief.
Sure.
It's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
normal to grieve, and what you're feeling, the craziness you're feeling, the anger, the emotions, you know, all of that is normal stuff. And so, yeah, you can, but you can move through this. Yeah. And I'll be here to help you move through this.
Absolutely. And that
Yeah.
reminds me, there's so many sections in the book where I talk about, I kind of acknowledge that professionals might be reading this book as well. And another
Hmm.
way of saying, of course, is I've seen something like this before, or other
Hmm.
people I work with experience something similar. And it's not a way of
Hmm.
saying my grief is like your grief. It's not comparing, but it's saying
Hmm.
this experience you're having, it's not unique to you. You're not going crazy. It's another way of saying you're not going
Hmm.
crazy, but it
Hmm.
is it is a pattern or is a part of normal grieving or it is folded into the whole experience. Like this is not scary to me. This is not
Yeah.
unfamiliar. And so to say that as a professional, when someone very genuinely feels as if their grief is making them crazy right in front of you, what
Uh-huh.
a beautiful validation to give
Hmm.
them as a professional. And so I have little sections for each of the three phrases. I'm like, here, if you're a professional, here's another way of saying that helps a client or a patient know that you are witnessing them in their grief and that they can break or rewrite these stories of I'm crazy, I'm alone, or it
Yeah.
will be like this forever. And to your point of supporters saying something like it doesn't feel like enough, like I need to fix their grief, I need to take their problems away, the counter I always have to that, and I wish I wrote about this in the book, but I didn't. It is almost every single griever I've ever come into contact with, when I ask them what they wish they would have had from friends and family, is I wish someone would have showed up. I wish someone would have validated my pain. I wish someone would have remembered my grief anniversaries or just remembered that I was grieving in general to say, hey, it's the holidays. I haven't
Hmm.
forgotten about you or something like that. And I wish I wouldn't have felt so alone in my despair. The
Hmm.
it's going to feel like this forever, that kind of belief. And in so many different ways, all they're saying is, I wish someone would have texted. I wish someone would have called. I wish someone would have put a hand on my shoulder at the workplace or at my church group or in my hobby club or whatever it is and say, hey, I haven't forgotten that you're grieving. I know this time
Hmm.
of year might really be hard. Or I know right now you're going through divorce proceedings right after your dad died. That's got to be really
Hmm.
hard. I'm here for you.
Hmm.
Like for anyone to have done that, that's what grievers are asking for. And
Hmm.
that's like such a bare minimum that we can all meet. And so for supporters who say, that's not enough, I need to fix their grief, I need to take away their pain, I'm like, why don't we start by giving grievers what they're actually asking for,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
simply to be remembered, acknowledged, and
Hmm.
and to feel as if they're not
Right.
alone in this
Right.
experience. To grievers, that is enough. And that's what
Right.
we can all give them.
Right. To be seen.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Shelby, I know we can talk hours about this, and I've got to be respectful of your time and tell folks how about where to find your books and how they can get in touch with you and do coaching if they need to or want to, and that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. I know that grief brain is very real, so I like to keep it as simple as humanly possible.
Mm.
Everything I do, if you want to buy one of my books, if you want to work with me, if you want to listen to my free podcast, if you want to read the blog, everything is at shelbyforsythia.com. And I'll just leave it there.
Awesome. And tell folks again, if we hadn't mentioned it already, the title of your podcast is Grief Grower.
Yes, absolutely. Grief Grower.
Mhm.
Helpful tools and hopeful conversations for life after loss. And that's free
Awesome.
anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome. Shelby, we'll be talking again, I'm sure, and do take time to follow her on social media and all the places. And we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary for people to get to this easily. And Shelby, this has just been a pleasure.
Thank you so, so much, Gordon. I'm so glad to have met you.